Hey folks, welcome back to a new installment of Toytrooper. Today we'll be looking at Hot Toys' new The Dark Knight Rises Bane movie masterpiece MMS 183 1/6 scale action figure. So here he is, guys, Bane right out of the box. And as you can see, he looks pretty badass. I have to say this is probably one of the more simple Hot Toys releases so far, especially in the last year. Most of the time they have so many little trinkets and accessories like weapons that comes along with the action figure. But because Bane didn't really have any weapons in the movie and his whole costume was pretty simple throughout the whole thing, the action figure stays true to that, and there's not many things that come with it. But there are kind of cool, some cool accessories, so I'll get to those in a little bit. First up, here he is in the regular costume, his vest, and he has that sash around his waist, and the overall design is very military-like, because he is a merc. Then you have that, the iconic Bane mask that was in the movie. One thing that I have to point out is because this is based off the true type action figure body from Hot Toys, there are 30 points of articulation, but because so much of Bane's body is exposed his character, you can see a lot of the joints in the body. And it's kind of weird because it has to be there, but because we're so spoiled with a lot of the more armor type figures like Iron Man or Batman, um, they can hide it better. But because he's so exposed, you can't really do anything about it. But still, it's a really cool figure. So here's a close up of Bane. I think the best part of this action figure has to be Bane's clothes. If you could see from his vest, there's a lot of different layers, all these little harnesses and rope or string that's kind of like keeping his armor together. Also, the big parts of the vest has to be those little padded armor pieces right here. Actually, it isn't just like a piece of PVC or plastic. It's actually kind of padding, so you can feel it. You can actually push it in, and then his vest has this beautiful stitching all around the collar and on the outside. It's not like glued on. It's just all sewn in. It's almost like they just shrunk the real thing. So that's the best part, and also the paint application. I'll show you a closer look in a little bit, but you could see all these little scars on his head right here. So Hot Toys really paid attention to all the little things about Bane that makes him unique. Also, there's this huge gash, scar point along his neck down to his back. As I mentioned before, the joints are very visible. So I'm not sure how fickle some collectors are. It doesn't really bother me, but some people think that, you know, those should be hidden, but because of the way Bane is, you can't really do anything about it. So here's a close-up of his face, and I have to say that Hot Toys did a pretty good job with Bane's face. Tom Hardy mentioned that there was a really huge challenge for him to be able to express emotions and act with that mask over his face because it cuts off his face and his mouth and his nose and everything, so he has to rely on his eyes. And Hot Toys really did a great job replicating that. You could just tell from his face that there is Tom Hardy in there. The likeness is pretty amazing. I'm not sure if it's an easier job for them because you just have to deal with the eyes and the proportions of the face and there's no hair or anything, but regardless, you could just tell that just from the eyes that it's Tom Hardy. Also, there's a lot of beautiful detail right here around his mask. It's kind of weathered down, has a nice metallic paint on it, so it has a really menacing look to it. And as I mentioned before, there's this subtle paint application around in the side of the head where the scars are and where the veins are, and it's just a little like it's a small things. There's a little bit of like a freckling in there. It's really beautiful. Other than that, the rest of the helmet is a little bit plain in my opinion. If you check out these little mechanical parts, it's very flat, and same goes for the rest of his helmet. But of course, we didn't really get to check out too much of it in the movie. Usually it's the front of his face. So I guess it's okay. As I mentioned before, Bane comes with a couple little accessories. So one thing about this figure is that you can actually display him in multiple different ways. So before I showed him with the vest on, you can also show him without the vest. If you remember the scene where he meets Commissioner Gordon in the sewers, he doesn't have any gear on, and he's just standing there showing his muscles and everything. And Hot Toys didn't just leave the body blank. They applied the same paint technique onto the skin as they did with the head. So there's a little bit of freckling all over the body. There's a nice little shading going on. And also, as I mentioned before, the scar that goes from the top of his neck to the bottom right here. It's right there. One thing I do admit is that because it's a true type body, the proportions on the body doesn't really match the Tom Hardy body that we saw in the movie. If you remember, his body was much more bulked up, so his pecs and his chest area was much more broader, and also his trapezius right here was a little bit more, I guess, much more higher. His shoulders were a little bit more bulked. He was, definitely yoked up, but here he's a little bit more slender and a little bit more muscular, but I guess you can't really do much with it. I'm not sure. I kind of wish that Hot Toys went in and retooled the True Type body just for him, but proportionally it is correct. But I just wish that he was a little bit more buff, just to match the movie. Here, without the armor, he looks a little bit more feeble, I guess you could say, compared to what we see in the movie. So yeah, I don't think I'm gonna be displaying it that way. One thing I do have to give you guys a tip is that when you guys remove that vest, take your time, because there are little clasps and little harnesses that you have to remove. I do suggest that you get little tweezers to help you remove the little bands, because I made the mistake of rushing through it for this review, and one of the parts kind of tore off, and it's something that I could repair with some super glue easily, but just to avoid yourself the headache and stress yourself out, take your time. Also, I definitely recommend that you pull his arms up to remove the vest, because it just kind of slides right back out. And same thing with putting it back on, is take your time. So here he is with one of his accessories on. Hot Toys included this black sweater that you put underneath his vest and sash. It's supposed to be the costume that he wears in City Hall at the end of the movie with the huge fight scene where he fights Batman on the stairs. But one thing that really disappointing about this little accessory is that the way it was made, it's very cheap and it's very big on him. So if you check it out, it looks like it's kind of like one size too big on him. Oh, here's that piece that I broke off. That's supposed to go right here, so I'll repair that later after the review. The reasoning also for this right here is because in that scene, he has his bracer over the sweater, so this arm right here is very tight and snugged around his arms. But because of how small this bracer is, there's no way you could get this sweater tucked underneath there. So the only option I have is to pull it up like that, which kind of throws everything off. And another thing you would notice is that I attached a different hand. This figure comes with 5 different hands, and this actually bracer is not the same one as the one you've seen before. This bracer has a little hole in it, so you put one of his thumbs through. It's kind of weird because the other bracer doesn't have that hole when you put in the fist. So I don't know why Hot Toys did it that way. They could have just done one, but at least they thought to put that in there, so I guess that's not too bad thing. So just from the look of the sweater, it's not that appealing, so I don't think I'm going to be displaying this. I'm just going to be putting it back in the box and never think about it again. So here's Bane with the last accessory, his coat. And I have to say, this is a really cool coat. I don't think I've seen a coat or a jacket this good since the Indiana Jones release by Hot Toys. It has a lot of beautiful lines to it, and the stitching is very pristine. And he has this, wool fabric on the inside, adds a little bit insulation. I have to admit that the figure doesn't look complete without it, because of the size of that jacket. It adds a little bit more of a mass to him, makes him look a little bit more bulkier than he was without it. Of course, unfortunately, because of the vest inside it, it kind of makes this figure a little bit flumpy on the back, but it can't be helped. You can see all the nice stitching on the collar as well. I would give you a tip that two things. When you put the coat on, pull the arms back just like how you would put on a jacket yourself. It would make it very easy, and you have to put them on with both arms backwards. Also, I would tell you to remove the bracer, because the bracer is so thick it's really hard to get this arm down, and even with it down you can't really see it, so just remove it. Another thing is, if you notice right here, it's really small, but it's just production errors. There's little threads that are like frayed or kind of popping out from a lot of the parts of the coat, and also throughout the figure. I recommend that you take a really sharp scissors and just kind of snip them off. Don't pull on them, because you could remove more threading than you really wanted to and damage the figure. Just to make it look clean, just snip those off with small scissors. If you have like a tailoring scissors that are small enough, then that would help as well. Don't use a razor blade, and like I said, don't pull on it. And I have to say, he looks the coolest this way. That other black sweater was a total fail, but this is a total win right here. So here's the verdict, guys. I'm a bit torn about this figure. I think it looks really cool, and at the price point of $189.99, I think it's a pretty average deal. The only problem that I see is that because Bane doesn't have any weapons, or he is a weapon, the accessories are very slim on this figure, and from the looks of it, a lot of the accessories they did provide, like the sweater and the coat, doesn't really fit that well on this figure. So it's a very simple figure. You're not going to be getting that much. Like what you see right here is what you get. But because there's not many really notable villains in Dark Knight Rises, and especially if you're a fan of the movie or just Batman in general, he is definitely an ad that you need for your collection. I have all the villains from the previous movies, like Scarecrow and Two-Face, and Bane definitely would go very nice with them in my collection. So on that note, you kind of have to decide if he's worth the money for you or not. If you remember my last review, for $200 you got a Thor, and that thing was pretty awesome, because there's just so many different layers to that figure. But then Bane is a little bit easier. What you're paying for is pretty much just to add a villain to go along with the Batman. I don't really think this figure is anything special, but I am a fan of the movie, even though it wasn't that great. So I'm happy with this purchase. But then I guess it all comes down to the person. Like, how much did you like that movie, or do you want to expand your Batman collection or the Dark Knight collection? So that's my recommendation. If you could find it for cheaper, pick them up. But other than that, it's all up to you guys. So thanks for watching, guys. Hopefully my next review will be the Black Widow figure from Hot Toys. Until then, you could follow me on Twitter at Toytrooper. And if you have any suggestions or any comments, please just leave it with on the YouTube page. And please subscribe if you like some of the reviews. And until then, keep collecting, guys.